Oh, no, it's bigger than I thought. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. At first it said 11 people. Okay. Let's go.
37. Yes.
All right, I just opened the chat window. Okay. Hello, everybody. Can you say hello if you can hear? Oh, actually, no. Just say yes if you can hear both Brad and me. So, Brad, say
Hi,
quick.
everybody. I hope you guys are all doing well.
Can you hear us? How about a yes? Come on, folks. There we go. All right. Thank you so much. Now, it's funny. See, we make this look easy, but behind the scenes, tonight was actually quite difficult. Brad came on, couldn't hear him. And poor Brad, he did everything. He rebooted his computer. He tried this and
Yeah,
that.
I did everything, Tom. That's right.
And then I opened up my Mac and tried it on my Mac. I could hear him just fine. It's my stupid PC that can't hear him. So we took care of that baby. Now I'm on the Mac. But on the Mac, I'm using the built-in microphone, unfortunately, because my Mac gets temperamental when I try to use this baby. I don't know why. I have to figure that out another time. So if I sound a little amateurish and you're saying, isn't this world-class broadcaster Tom Woods? Why does he sound? It's because of – but okay. All right.
Hey, Tom, real quick question. I'm sorry about this. Since we just bragged about how good we are, I'm not seeing any messages. Where are you looking?
Oh, okay. In the to get to the chat window, right to the right of your head or our heads,
right,
you'll see a series of options, and the second symbol down looks like a thought bubble or a voice bubble with 3 dots in it.
Right.
Click that.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
Now, some people are saying that your fan is a little distracting. Okay. All right. Somebody said that fan is giving me a seizure.
It should be stopping.
Okay.
Sorry, everybody. Yep, Baxter. There you go, man. I mean, Rob. Yeah, if I can make you guys happy with that.
All right. Good. Okay. Well, listen, everybody. This platform that we use for these, the way it works is in that chat window, you type. You can do general conversation with each other, but this is also where you submit questions. And if you type your message and then you click to send it as a question, it will be highlighted as a question, and we will see it more easily. So this is Brad Birzer. Many of you know him. We have a lot of new people at Liberty Classroom as a result of my unrelenting email campaign over the weekend, where finally you just broke down. Your resistance weakened. You broke down. You got it. Here you are for our first of the live sessions. Brad teaches a wide variety of courses for us because not only has he written about, taught on Jacksonian America, but he's also done science fiction and mythology. He's all over the place. He knows everything there is to know. So it'll be a lot of fun to ask him some questions. He's also the prize-winning
crazy humanities guy.
Yeah, that's right. We need a token humanities guy.
The hippie humanities guy, right? Right.
But he's also the prize-winning biographer of Russell Kirk. So now, people saying no picture or sound, all I can say is refresh your browser because it's a local problem. And having said that, let's go. So go ahead, folks, and submit some questions. While we're waiting for the questions, let me tell you, Brad, you also have a role with the American Conservative magazine that people may not know about yet. So why don't you tell them about that?
Sure. Much to my surprise, I got asked to be the president of the American Conservative sometime this summer, and so I started doing that August 1st. It's been really great, actually. I mean, I've never been in a managerial position before, so it's been interesting, the steep learning curve, but I'm doing my best to, well, I mean, my goal is I would love to be able to recreate the kind of old late 1950s, early 1960s libertarian conservative alliance. So hopefully we can do that. And I think things are moving in that direction, and there are a lot of good people there. So Tom's on the board, on the advisory board, and yeah, there's some really, really excellent people. So I think it's got a great future. But thanks, Tom.
So the website is theamericanconservative.com. So do check that out. It's wonderful to know one of your Liberty Classroom faculty members is running the show over there.
Yeah, so, right.
Great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll start with John's question, then we'll go down to Adam. although Brett, are you also? Do you also see the? You're also seeing the chat.
I'm seeing him now. Yeah, yeah.
All right. So John's question is: are there any other authors that you think capture the mythos like Tolkien does?
Yeah, John, that's a great question, and it's always hard because I think Tolkien, in so many ways, created the genre. It really wouldn't be there without Tolkien, and so no one's really ever going to measure up to him. I think we're always going to have people that we like. There are people out there who are doing really good things, but for someone to create that kind of deep mythology that Tolkien did, and it wasn't just Tolkien, of course, it was his son, Christopher. So you've got John Ronald Reuel, the original Tolkien, who's writing until he dies in 1973. And then, of course, for those of you who've been watching the news, his son, Christopher, who's 93, just retired about 2 months ago. So he'd been doing that forever. And it's really the two Tolkiens, I think. So the question, to try and answer you, the question is, it's going to be really difficult for someone to do that because you've got essentially two full lives of two men that went into that mythology. Now, where it's going to go with Amazon having bought it, I'm a little nervous about what they're going to do with it. But of course, it's going to expand. I mean, that's no question. But I do think that there's some really good. Depending on what you want, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know, probably. I actually really like the Harry Potter series. I don't think it's anywhere near Tolkien or Lewis's level, so don't. But if you're looking for something that I think is engaging and teaches traditional virtues and is part of the Western canon, I think Rowling did a pretty good job. I think if she had taken twice as long, she would have a much better product. But it's still good for what it is. And I'm glad my kids read it. I have no problem with them running around and talking about that. I think there's some other good people too. Tom and I have talked about this guy a couple of times. I really like Kevin J. Anderson. He's also just writing constantly, and he's doing very good things. He would be very comfortable with a lot of what we talk about here. He's not that political, but if you pushed him, he's pretty libertarian, doing really interesting things, which is probably why he didn't get the Hugo last year. There was some political crud going on about that. But yeah, they're good people. And I actually, even though she's not a libertarian and not a conservative, I really love Margaret Atwood. I think that Atwood has done some just fascinating things, in large part because I think she does have that kind of deep background that Tolkien held. So anyway, John, that's probably more than you wanted and probably less than you wanted. But I do think there are some good people out there. And I think there are a lot of people trying to do good work. And it's coming maybe in different forms than kind of epic fiction. But certainly, I think there are TV series right now, like Stranger Things, that have really gotten into a deeper mythology and given us something that we can really think about. And that's what I'm always looking for.
Brad, I don't think I'm intelligent enough to read Adam's question beneath John's. Can you take a crack at that while I get a glass of water?
Yeah, sure. I am not a Girard scholar at all. I teach with two people at Hillsdale who are very serious about him. And so almost anything I said would just be really mimicking what they said. So I just don't feel qualified to answer that. I do think that it's a great question. And I think there's a lot of things that need to be done, especially when examining science fiction and fantasy, using some of not the radical stuff. I mean, Derrida and Foucault don't do a lot for me, but people like, from what I know of Girard, I like someone a little bit older than Girard. I like Gabriel Marcel, who was one of the existentialists of the 1940s and 50s. Romano Guardini, known usually in conservative circles, not as much in libertarian, but they all influenced Girard in various ways. So yeah, it's if you can do something with that, Adam, you should. I think there's a lot to do with that, and I think there's a lot that can be written and thought about dealing with that. Tom, I was just saying, I have two colleagues. Okay, yeah.
Andrew's question is: have you seen/read the Expanse series?
I have not, and let me put it this way: I watched the first episode and I thought it was really interesting, and some things came up, and I didn't get it finished, but I've got it in my wait list on my iPad, so it'll happen hopefully soon. I've heard very good things about it. One of my good friends in Texas, Eric Heater, another good libertarian guy who's an engineer and a lawyer, he raves about it and talks about. I mean, he thinks it's probably the best thing on TV right now. I would have a hard time saying that just because I am so, and I'm not actually that much of a TV person, but I'm just so taken with Stranger Things. I think. I mean, to me, Tom, have you seen Stranger Things yet?
I haven't, and I mean, well, I heard one person I respect say she didn't think much of it, but then I hear you
Oh,
saying it's
oh, oh.
unbelievable.
Well, first of all, it's so hardcore libertarian in a way that's artful. So it's not in your face, but if you miss it, you've missed the whole show. I mean, it's great, and it's also. I'm a little older than you, Tom. The main characters in the story were exactly my age when I was, 1983. So there's a
Okay,
lot of nostalgia there as well. So yeah, but you
I'll,
would have,
I'll
Tom.
check
You
that.
probably you probably were not nerd enough. Did you play Dungeons and Dragons?
I didn't. I
Ah,
actually.
see, that's the problem, Tom. We got to go back and change that.
Oh, I was. I had different kind of nerdy qualities, but um,
Yeah,
why don't you read? Because I don't know anything about the
sure.
Lord of the Rings movies. Read Drew's question at the top.
Oh, oh, well, Drew, I'm a little biased on this. I didn't like the Peter Jackson movies, and I realize for a lot of people that's heresy. But I grew up reading Tolkien, and so
Well, just so
Tolkien.
everybody knows, the question is about the
Oh,
Lord.
sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the question is, why do you think Tom Bombadil was left out of the Lord of the Rings movies? So my initial reaction, and this isn't fair, Drew. I mean, I'm being a bit of a jerk about this, but my initial reaction is, thank God Tom Bombadil wasn't in the movies. I don't think even the best, at least for me, from what I know, I can't imagine a Christopher Nolan or an Alfred Hitchcock being able to pull it off. I just think the character's too weird for it to move beyond the really to move beyond the book. So I love Bombadil. I love Goldberry. I mean, I think I probably had a crush on Goldberry, his wife, since I was 10. So yeah, I'm glad that I can keep them in my imagination if that helps. But I know if you like the movies, then I'm probably just sounding terrible.
Well, that's interesting. I actually had not heard somebody, a fan of the books, be disappointed with the movies. I thought everybody loved the movies. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I did not. I liked the first one, and then I thought they went downhill. So I was not happy, and I thought The Hobbit especially was. Ugh.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's go down to Jerry's question on a completely different topic. What do you believe? And I think Brad, I think you and I'll have fun tackling this question. What do you
Sure.
believe the core disagreements between
Ah,
Rothbard
sure.
disciples and Kirk disciples are?
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and start, Tom? Since I've been talking, please.
Okay. All right. Well, one thing I've learned from reading and talking to you, Brad, is that Kirk was not as far from libertarianism as maybe he himself may have
Right.
insisted. Right.
Yeah.
So I know for a fact he had a book. I mean, he wrote a lot, but he had a book on economics, the title of which I'm not sure I ever knew. But he was basically free market. He's basically a free market
Oh
guy.
yeah.
And although he sometimes seems to place himself within a European conservatism, I think it was a basically liberal European conservatism. I think it was Burkean rather than de Maistre.
Definitely.
So Kirk is more. I mean, I know Kirk would have been appalled at the idea that there is no conservative tradition in America because we're all Lockeans.
Right.
But you know, and I know he talked about Edmund Burke, a good game, but there is. I think he is more sympathetic. I mean, I kind of am with you because when I actually look at what does he advocate, I mean, for you can talk flowery language about conservatism all you like, but what in practice does he advocate? It's not anything a million miles removed from what I advocate.
No.
I would think the difference, though, is definitely in temperament, but between the two men. I mean, Rothbard was very much a burn everything down,
Right.
press the button, go on ahead, whereas
Yeah.
Kirk would have wanted to move more deliberately. I think also, I think Kirk would have thought that life is too variegated to be reducible to a single libertarian non-aggression principle. That just can't be. Or the idea that there could be one political arrangement that's best for all peoples and that should be exported and imposed. Now, of course, Rothbard didn't think you should violently impose it, but he would say that there are natural rights, and these natural rights are universal. And I think Kirk, I don't know what his theory of rights was, but I don't think he believed in abstract natural rights the way, maybe I do know what his theory of rights is. He believes in prescriptive rights that are hallowed by tradition. And he would think of Rothbard as being an abstract theorizer, and he would not mean that as a compliment. And I think beyond that, Rothbard is only talking about politics. He has other things to say, but as a libertarian, he would say libertarians only say don't initiate aggression. They have nothing to say about art, aesthetics, morality, whatever. So there's no incompatibility. He could have had exactly the same moral views that Russell Kirk had, but his point would be that in politics, all that matters is don't use aggression. And I don't think Kirk thought all of human life together was reducible to that. And certainly Kirk did not believe that the state was just an artificial contrivance. I think, like with Aristotle, he would have said it's a natural institution. It can be perverted, but he would say the family can also be perverted. That doesn't mean we get rid of the family.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you think about this?
Oh, no, Tom, I think that was beautiful. No, not at all. It was a beautiful response. I was writing a couple of things down. What's interesting for me, I've been spending the last year reading Nisbet as much, Robert Nisbet, the great sociologist. Yeah. And, he calls himself a conservative too, and he makes fun of libertarians every once in a while. But I don't mean this with any hyperbole. I have yet to encounter a libertarian of that generation, not our generation, Tom, but of that generation, who was more anti-state than Nisbet was. And Nisbet actually, towards the end of his life, he started talking about how there had to be a natural allegiance between traditionalists and anarchists. He didn't say libertarian, he said anarchists. And he writes about that constantly, that they are really much more alike than people realize. So I think there is something to that. Another guy that I like very much, Christopher Dawson, also grew more pro-anarchy as he got older. I say this because Kirk really went the other way. When Kirk was in college, he would have had his great hero was Albert J. Nock. Nock was everything. And they corresponded, and I think Kirk saw himself as an anarchist at that time. But as he started reading more T.S. Eliot, he got more into the kind of mystical aspects of what a community is. And he was always very, very small government. If we're going to have a government, he was on the side of the anti-federalists, basically. But he did kind of turn it into a republic. And I understand this, especially, you do too, Tom, even though we may not agree. I'm just studying the classics. You read Cicero, it's kind of hard to walk away and say, oh yeah, there is something beautiful about a small republic. There's something, so when I lecture for IHS, my responses to people are always, look, if we have to have a government, and I'd rather not, if we do, I want it to be a small minimalist republic. Right. That's, if we could have anarchy, I'm fine with that. But I think, if we're going to have government, and I think Kirk, I'd have friends who are Kirkians who would say I'm taking that too far, but I don't think so. I think I would agree with you, Tom. I think they were pretty close. And of course, we know, Kirk dies in 94, but in 91 and 92, he and Rothbard are meeting constantly because they're getting ready for the 92 presidential election. So they're meeting personally. Yeah. Yeah, they wanted somebody to take down Bush and to take down the empire as they saw it. So, yeah, I think that says something, quite a bit, actually.
The dislike of the Bush family can bring a lot of people together. How nice.
That's right.
All right, how about this question, Brad? I don't know anything about the Hugo Awards except they have to do with science fiction. But somebody writes, Gail writes, what's the story of the Hugo Awards turmoil? I didn't know there was any.
Yeah, Gail, it was... it's probably been 2 years now. And there was something that went out, and I followed it at the time, and I wrote a little piece on it. And I haven't followed it since then. What happened? There was, during the award nominations, there was some fury because it looked like whoever had nominated the candidates for the Hugo that year had kind of split it so that you had libertarians and conservatives against very leftist science fiction writers. And then the conservatives or the libertarians, these were probably a lot of very angry college guys who got ticked off, and they started a campaign to bring down the leftist guys, but they did it in ways that, as I understand it, so if I've got this wrong and someone knows the story better, fill me in. But my understanding is they fudged a few things. They didn't do anything illegal or unethical, but they were fudging the rules a little bit. And when it came out, a lot of people thought, oh, here are these conservative libertarians who are trying to take over our field. And so they weren't the argument against the libertarians and conservatives, which was probably political. They argued it was mechanical, that, oh, we're angry that these guys tried to fudge the system, but it's pretty clear. And so Kevin Anderson was up for the Hugo that year and probably would have won it had there not been this controversy. So he gets lumped in, even though he's probably moderate conservative, but sympathetic. I think he got lumped in with the libertarians, and that was it. So, and they've really split, and they had done a good job going almost like 30 years without having a political split. And so, if anything, we can be glad that it went that long. But now it looks like the Hugo's kind of done as a serious award. It's going to be politicized from here on out, almost certainly by the left.
Mm. Jeez,
so I hope that explains.
But in a way, isn't that a microcosm of what's happening in American society? Really, that everything is that way.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Well, yeah. Look at the news, right? Every day.
Right. Really, Brad, it makes. I thought the 1980s, when I was growing up and you were sort of growing up, I thought that was contentious, but that looks positively ironic compared to.
Absolutely.
Today. And by the way,
idyllic and ironic. Absolutely.
Ironic is a word I learned from Bill Buckley, because they asked him. I remember the thing was he had used the word ironic, and somebody asked him, "Why didn't you just say peaceful?" And his answer was, "I desired the third syllable."
That's right. Great. Okay, can I tell you just really quickly?
Yeah, sure.
So my second academic article I published was on the Choctaw Indians, and I ended it by using that the agreement that was made was an ironic agreement. And the editor, when I got it, he had changed it to ironic. It's like, no!
Ironic? What does that even
not
mean?
At all, right? This is bizarre. Anyway, sorry. So,
okay. All right, let's go to Brian, who asks, I grew up on Asimov, but he was a strong advocate of a centralized state. How do you feel about Asimov? Well, I've never read him, so I can't comment.
He's a great thinker. He's a great writer. He's very much a part of the tradition. And so even if I don't like his politics, which I don't, I consider him to be one of the greats, and it's hard. But, it's interesting, Brian. I don't feel that way about Arthur C. Clarke. Clarke, I think partly because his politics are so openly leftist, it's hard for me to go back and read him, even when I know he's writing good stuff. So I'm probably being a little two-faced about that. I think I like Asimov enough. I'm willing to put up with that. But Clarke, I can't get past that. It's a fair question.
Christopher says, hey, what did you write about Choctaw Indians? I'm part Choctaw.
Oh, I wrote my second academic article I wrote. This was back in the 90s when I was in grad school. It was a paper I wrote for a seminar and actually got it published, which was nice. But I wrote on what happened. So my piece was on what happened to the Choctaw Indians after the horrific Trail of Tears. So after the forced removal of Oklahoma. And what's really interesting about them, it's an utterly libertarian story. When they get out to Oklahoma, despite the fact that they've lost almost 2/3 of their population because of the forced removal, and because when they get to Oklahoma, none of the supplies are waiting for them that were promised. So you have this population goes from about 18,000 to 6,000 in a year. It's horrific. But after that, what the Choctaws did on their territory, not a reservation yet, of course, a territory, what they did was they opened up homesteading. So they allowed for all the Choctaws to go out and basically squat on the land, and then it was divided up wherever they squatted, and what they worked, very Lockean, that became their territory. And by the time you get to 1855, 1860, the Choctaws are actually by ethnicity, and I realize the numbers can be fudged here, but if you just break down all the various ethnic groups in America, like uh, English from near London versus, say, North English from, I'm just drawing a blank here, and then Scottish and so forth. If you take the Choctaws at that point, they were the one or two wealthiest ethnic groups in America. So they turned their lives around despite every horrible thing that happened to them. So that, I hope that helps. If you email me, I'll gladly send you the articles. So just if you want to email me at bbirzer@hillsdale.edu, don't bother Tom. But if you want to email me, I'll send that to you. So you may be bored out of your mind, but there it is.
All right, I'm going to take the moderator's privilege and ask Brad a question of my own, and I'm going to take notes on this because we're coming up on Christmas, and I have to think about gifts for my girls. And I would like to know about good works of fiction, and it can be science fiction in particular. And it doesn't have to have a lesson. It doesn't have to be libertarian. Just good, just good for them to be exposed to. The ages I have in mind would probably be my two oldest, who would be 14 and 12. What would you recommend for people that age?
Well, I have not read these, but my kids like them a lot. The Rick Riordan series, dealing with basically all the Greek mythology. If the Greek gods were basically, whatever they are, who come through and they live to this day. My kids love those. I have not read those.
Okay.
But
I'm typing this in, by the way. That's what I'm doing. I'm taking notes.
Good. Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
But I would, and I think I mentioned this to you once before, Tom, but it was in a quick conversation. I really like Terry Brooks. So he wrote, when you and I were kids, he wrote a book that he still keeps this series going called Shannara. And it's okay. His when he gets into high fantasy, he's basically ripping Tolkien off. He's not that great. But he wrote a series of books about a decade ago about a little girl who grows up in northern Illinois. In fact, it's Reagan's hometown, or right outside of Reagan's hometown. And she discovers that she's got all these powers over nature, but only in this one area. And the book's called The Word and the Void. That's the series. And I read it, and I actually, even though it was about 10 years old when I read it last summer, I thought it was the best thing I read for the entire year in terms of fiction. And then I had my girls read it, and they loved it. So there's this is why I remember we talked about it briefly. There's one page where one kind of R-rated thing happens. And it's not, I mean, it's more PG-13. So I wanted to make sure that when we read it, my girls kind of understood what was going on. But it's one of those things where the hero kind of slips up sexually with a woman, but then he has to pay for it because by doing that, he's ruined his purity. And it's not explicit, but it's clear. It's like, it's like Captain Kirk waking up and putting his boots on as he gets out of bed. It's implied more than anything else, but it is there. Other than that, The Word and the Void, there are 3 books in that trilogy. They're excellent. So that would be my highest recommendation by far.
Okay, fair enough. Okay,
I read that whole, and some of you who are younger are probably not going to appreciate this, but I read the whole the Katniss Hunger Games, and I thought, they're fine. There's nothing that your girls wouldn't dislike. I just didn't think they started off really inventive, and then they became so mainstream by the end that it was kind of boring. But the first one's good. It's just, I thought it was a terrible ending. So those are good. I mean, there are a couple of other things, Tom, that I'd recommend. Certainly anything by Madeleine L'Engle is very good. Maybe that's more upper grade school than junior high level, but still very good. So, a Swiftly Tilting Planet and those books, they're wonderful, especially for kids.
Okay, I'm writing this down. Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Right.
And have they read Lewis's space trilogy yet?
One of them has, yes.
Okay, yeah, that there's some deep stuff in that that's also PG-13, but Lewis does it so well that it's hard not to be okay with it.
Right. And by the way, thank you to people in the chat room. I'm also noting your suggestions, so thank you for that. Jerry asks, have our two hosts considered collaborating to create graphic novels that tell historical adventure tales from a libertarian viewpoint? Well, I can say no, and not going to happen. That's a great idea, but I've got my life just the way I want it, and I'm not falling back into working too much. So
there is a guy though who does that. His name's Chuck Dixon. He used to write Batman, and he got fired from DC for being too libertarian. And he's a great guy. He wrote the Batman series. He wrote Nightwing, Robin for about any of those of you know DC Comics. Those are various characters. And he got kind of run out. He's now being brought back in because he sold so well. But he wrote a graphic novel a year ago that takes Amity Schle's book on the New Deal. He made a graphic novel out of it. It's totally anti-FDR.
wow.
And Chuck Dixon, Dixon. He's a great guy in Florida. He lives right by you, Tom. I think he lives right by you.
I did not know that.
I think he's right outside of Orlando. Yeah, he's a cool guy. I mean, he's written for the Wall Street Journal, but really, he's the guy. Do you know Batman at all? He created Bane, who's a Latin American bad guy, and he's Chuck is an interesting guy, really interesting, and so through Facebook we've corresponded. He loves Hillsdale, so he's been very good to me. Very good, actually. I've sent him some ideas. So was that Jerry who did that? I mean, there are possibilities of doing that. There's another libertarian guy who's really big by the name of Paul Pope, Pope. I assume you say Pope. Maybe it's Pope. But he's probably your age, Tom. He went through IHS when I was going through, but he was younger. And he's a libertarian guy, and he does his stuff. I think he's brilliant. It's a little avant-garde for me. I don't mind innovation, but it's almost innovative just to be innovative in what he's doing. But he wrote a great graphic novel about Batman set in 2039 and in a dystopian world. That's Batman's the one anarchist and the government's trying to kill him. It's great stuff. Really great. So,
have you read a book called This Perfect Day?
Yes, Ira Levin.
Is that a good book?
It's good. It's tame. When it came out, I think 1973, maybe, it was probably pretty innovative, but it never was. It kind of tried to be a more best-selling version of Brave New World, and it has that. It feels like he was trying to get movie rights. Okay. That makes sense, right?
Okay. I got you.
Okay, but he's a good guy and he's a libertarian, if you read Boys from Brazil or Rosemary's Baby, those are actually they're creepy, but those are serious works of art. This Perfect Day is good, but not at that level.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, then other people are asking if you've read or heard of L. Neil Smith. Because I have, sure. But I haven't read it.
Yeah, I have. The guy's really, really thoughtful, I think. He's kind of a one-trick pony. He's got that whole theory that if America had gone with Jefferson rather than Hamilton, which, I don't disagree with, but he bases a lot of his science fiction on that. And once you've read, at least for me, and if you're a fan, I apologize, but for me, it was kind of like you read one of his books, you've read all of them. But, I'm glad he's doing well. And, Mike W., yes, Paul Pope did write Berlin Batman about the Mises Papers, a story set in Nazi Germany where Batman has to save Mises, which is pretty cool. So, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. All right. There's one other science fiction libertarian that I'm just drawing a blank on his name, right? J. Neil Schulman, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a cool book in 1979, I think, a dystopian, like how the government could fall apart almost instantly. So,
okay,
worth checking out.
All right, let's see. Now, so much has scrolled by. I hope I'm not missing anybody's question, so I'll do my best here. Yeah, I know Ralph Raico liked This Perfect Day. That's how I found out about it.
I remember that too. Ralph, he loved that book.
Yeah, let's see.
Ralph was a good guy. I miss him.
Yeah, I know. It's a shame not to have him anymore.
And
Uh,
Leonard Liggio too. Man,
yeah, I know. I got to know him in the early '90s,
yeah.
and he read my book, The Church and the Market. He read the manuscript for
Oh
that.
wow, how
Yeah,
nice.
so that was
Oh, that's
great.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, almost everybody who read that manuscript for me is deceased now. So I'm on my own now. Everybody who might have helped me out of a jam
Yeah.
passed on. It's the kiss of death, that
It
book.
would. It's
Do
also
not send comments about that book.
I just turned 50, so I'm feeling my life is, you know, I'm feeling it. Ah.
All right, let's see. Can you uh, hang on just a minute here?
Sure.
Somebody asked a question, and maybe you could reprint it about somebody saying I can't find it now, but I remember the question was something like, um, Tolkien was once asked if he had seen behind the. It was no. Somebody asked Tolkien if he had seen behind the veil, and he said yes, he believed he had. What do you think that was all about? And that question is somewhere, and I can't find it.
The only thing that I can remember, I would assume that was something dealing with Catholicism, because he had said he believed he had had that mystical experience where he was praying in church before the sacrament in Catholics, for Catholics, the presentation of the host in adoration, and he thought that he had kind of heard the voice of God through a million angels or something. That's the only thing I know of, seeing beyond the veil. Oh, there, I see that. Verlin Flieger, this was Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. Had once asked Tolkien if he had seen behind the veil, and he said yes. I'm not sure. I can ask. I don't know Flieger, but I know one of her students, Carl Hostetter, who's a good guy. And in fact, I'll write that down, Aaron. And I put my email on there, right above you, bbirzer@hillsdale.edu. Aaron, if you want to email me and I can email Carl, I'd be happy to. So just let me know. Sorry, I can't answer that any better than that.
Sorry for fleeing, but
Oh, not at all.
I have to. We got to get give us more questions here because I got to get you a question because I have to send a quick. It's a long story.
No,
We
no problem.
get kids, we get emergencies, we get whatever. Will I share my notes about book recommendations with us? I could. Yeah, I'll try and if I don't know if I'll remember. Okay, what else do we want to talk to Brad about? I mean, a lot of you could ask Brad about other things too, right? Well, how about this, Brad? I'm just curious. What this semester? What are you teaching at Hillsdale?
So right now, I'm teaching a course on T.S. Eliot and people that went into T.S. Eliot's thought, and then people that came out of it. So that's a senior seminar that I'm doing. I'm also teaching a course on the American West right now and American Indians, and then I've got the Great Books freshman seminar that I always do. So yeah, any of those things that anybody wants to ask about, that's great. I've been doing a lot of work, believe it or not. I've been working on, as I had mentioned earlier, Robert Nisbet, but I've also got a book proposal in that Tom has heard me talking about for a couple of years that looks like it's actually going to happen. I'm doing a book on the history of Batman. So the last 80 years, and it's based on anarchist theory. Really looking at some of the people that Tom knows better than I do, the great Irish guy who's affiliated with Mises. Is it Casey?
Oh yeah,
Gerard Casey? Yeah.
yeah,
Is that okay? I've never
yeah.
met him, but using some of his ideas, and I'm trying to look at the way. Basically, my argument, if you, I don't want to bore you guys, but my argument is essentially that the Bruce Wayne Batman character is the ultimate American character once we get into the urban era. So before it would have been Huck Finn, but once we get into the urban era, it's really Batman, and I do believe that. I don't think that's just hyperbole on my part. So that's how I'm approaching the book. But it will be by far the most blatantly libertarian book that I've worked on and written, without
Well, Brad,
question.
you must keep an eye on this much more than I do. Are there plans for additional Batman movies, as far as you know?
Yeah, it's up in the air right now because there's crazy in politics going on, not right left politics, but Zack Snyder, who's been doing things for DC, has been kind of run out, and he had a family tragedy. A daughter committed suicide. Some of the movies haven't done as well, and Warner Brothers has not treated him well. He's actually one of us. he is a libertarian conservative guy. He's actually religious. He's a high church Anglican, amazingly enough, and he's very libertarian. And you can see that if you go back and look at some of his movies, they are deeply libertarian. Watchmen and the Batman versus. But yeah, Brian, you're right. Ben Affleck wants out, so there's a lot of chaos right now about what's going to happen. My guess is with the way the universe that they've got right now with the new Justice League movie, they'll probably make the guy Bruce Wayne will probably be moved up into kind of a mentor figure, and they'll hire someone else to be the new Batman. Probably the Nightwing or Robin figure will become Batman. But I do think, and I've got I don't want to, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I do have a longish piece coming out in the next issue of the American Conservative that argues that the Nolan movies, the Dark Knight trilogy, that these are kind of the ultimate American movies, and that nothing's been done this great since Hitchcock passed away. So yeah, you don't have to agree with that, of course, but I had a great time with that. So I'm really enjoying the project.
The reason I asked about the movie is that I'm always thinking about a hook for a book, to get you in.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, if there's a Batman movie, you've got a chance of much more getting on radio and stuff.
Yeah, unless unless there's just a complete collapse of the superhero genre in the next 2 years. That's no.
It should be okay.
Yeah, it should be okay. Yeah. Right. So
we have this question: can you talk about Tolkien's idea about the true myth?
Oh, yeah, we have to get pretty theological. Tolkien believed very firmly that there was only one myth that really mattered. And for Tolkien, he's a devout Catholic. I don't know how familiar people are with him, but his father died when he was very young. And then his mother converted to Catholicism because she met a lot of John Henry Newman's students. Newman was dead by the time they went back to Birmingham in England, but she went into the oratory there that Newman had founded, and she'd never been treated that intellectually, and she was brilliant. You can imagine Tolkien's mother was just a genius. And so she was very taken, and so she converted, but her family disowned her at that point. So here she is, she's got two kids. The family disowns her, and she gets a rare form of tuberculosis that could have been treated with medicine. And the family refused to give her the money for that unless she renounced her Catholicism, which she refused to do. And so she signed over her kids to the local Catholic priest there at the oratory. And the kids were then raised by the priests at the oratory. So Tolkien, from about age 11 and a half, till he died, his legal guardian was a priest. And so he always, everything he did, and you can't exaggerate this. Everything Tolkien did, every woman who appears in his books is in some way a reflection of his mother. He felt like he had to spend his whole life living up to her martyrdom. So when you ask about the true myth, a lot of that comes from his praise of his mother. And he believed very firmly, and he is an anarchist. I hope you guys know that. Tolkien was a blatant anarchist, but he was a Catholic anarchist, not like Guy Fawkes, but his idea was more or less that the Catholic Church should be the one dominant cultural institution, and there should be no competing political institutions with that. So the one true myth is truly Christ dying and being resurrected. That's the only true myth. So he called this the eucatastrophe, the opposite of a catastrophe, not the disaster, but the great ending. So everything we do, even if you're enjoying this conversation, if you like Tom and my friendship, that if we're doing anything right, anything at all, if anything I've said is true, anything Tom has said is true, for Tolkien, it's only because Christ's light has shone in us and we've accepted it. So anyway, I assume you guys probably didn't mean to talk about theology too much, but that's his true myth. So everything is about the death and resurrection of Christ, the only true story. Everything else is a shadow of that.
How
was that, Tom?
Yeah,
you've written on Catholic stuff, so.
Well, how about this one? If you could live in a sci-fi world, which would it be and why?
Does it have to be sci-fi? I mean, I want to go to the Shire. I want Tolkien. Oh, that's a great question. I'd have to think about that.
Oh yeah, think
That's
about that. We'll get back to you next time on that one.
and my answer would have been different at 20 than it would be at 50. Um, Probably because I was in better shape at 20 and I would have wanted to have lived in a post-apocalyptic world. I would have wanted to been the lone guy who was out there repopulating the earth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
We're
It's
getting
okay.
in, we just went from Jesus to
People are asking about there are shows on Netflix like Godless, for example, about the American West, and they're wondering if you're familiar with these shows. And
no.
no,
I
okay,
have watched on Netflix. I have watched. It's incredible, and I'm just dropping the name Longmire.
yeah.
That is incredible,
So you
and
like
that,
that?
yeah, that gets a lot right. And it's just, I mean, those are manly men, right? They're real heroes. They're the John Wayne kind of guys. Somebody mentioned Firefly too, and I have watched all of Firefly several times. And the main character, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name right now, but he is the John Wayne in the science fiction universe, and I love that kind of character. I love truly heroic, flawed characters. I just think they're great.
Um, let's see. There's another one that I wanted that jumped right out at me as a good. Oh yeah,
Malcolm
yeah.
Reynolds. Thanks, Archie.
Your opinion on
Andrew.
Kurt Vonnegut?
Oh, I like Vonnegut a lot, actually.
The thing is, it's been so long since I read him.
Right. Well, most
I was
people only read him in
14.
high school, right? And a junior high and high school, and then they kind of forget him.
Right.
I think Vonnegut. I've read both of his memoirs, Palm Sunday, and can't remember the other one right now. I've got it. It's a beautiful book with a nice tan cover, like a bronze tan cover. But anyway, I think he had really good things to say. He was very good on war. Certainly for those of us who consider ourselves, anti-interventionist, small government. Uh, he had some kind of cultural views that were pretty leftist, not in a good way, from my opinion. But I think his politics were pretty good, and I think things like Slaughterhouse Five, that if you read that coming away thinking that American technology is really great to go kill people, I mean, you miss a point. And also his book, which is not really science fiction, but kind of about the Nazi Mother Night. Man, that is one insightful book into fascism. So yeah, thanks for asking. I like Vonnegut. I know he did some goofy stuff, but William Buckley loved him. He had Buckley, Vonnegut, the first time Vonnegut ever published the story about egalitarianism gone wrong. I am so sorry, guys. I can't believe I'm dropping all these names right now. But the really great dystopian short story that Vonnegut wrote, he wrote for National Review. He wrote for Buckley. So it'll come to me in a moment. Someone might know that. Anyway, it's Harrison Bergeron. Harrison
Oh,
Bergeron, right? Of course. Yeah. So it's a great story.
um, somebody asks about when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict had said some negative things about the Harry Potter series. And I don't remember the details of that. But
Yeah.
the real question that the person is asking is, what was the attitude of the Catholic Church toward the mythological works of Tolkien and Lewis? And
Yeah.
I don't think there was any official, I don't think in those days popes would have spoken.
No,
I think they would have viewed it beneath their dignity to speak about particular things. They would
Right.
talk about degenerate movies in general, right? But you wouldn't read that out in a papal document.
It's very interesting.
And they didn't go around giving newspaper interviews all the time either.
No, that's right. But
This
when
stuff wouldn't come out.
Benedict was Ratzinger, he loved Lewis, and he gave a couple of speeches about Lewis, and they're very interesting. He also knew Vogelin, which is also, I think, Benedict went and saw Eric Vogelin's lectures at Munich in the 1950s. He had all these connections, but the one person, and John, I hope you've got the good Irish name, so I hope this means something to you, but one of the most fascinating figures, I think, of the last 50 years was Hans Urs von Balthasar. And von Balthasar, who was one of course, Ratzinger's best friends, and they formed Communio together to fight some of the Thomism that had gotten a little crazy. When von Balthasar died, he had the complete works of Tolkien and Lewis next to his bed. That's what he kept, along with his breviary and his Bible. That's what he kept next to his bed in his cell in Switzerland. So there are hints, and obviously Tolkien was a devout Catholic. Lewis was not pro-Catholic; he was extremely anti-Catholic. But it's hard, I think, for anybody today to go back and look at Lewis and not see something good in him. I think he misunderstood Catholicism. He's a Northern Irish Protestant, but his best friend was Tolkien, so he couldn't have been that anti-Catholic, even though he seemed it at times. So yeah, great question.
I'm looking up a book title. Okay, the structure of okay. Just because somebody is asking, because we keep using the word anarchist, and somebody wants to know what would this look like. So what I would recommend a couple things. There's a book by Randy Barnett, who's been either at Boston College or BU, then at Georgetown Law and maybe other places. But Randy Barnett has an excellent book called The Structure of Liberty that handles this, and that dealing with the legal system. But what's really great is the very last section of the book is a thought experiment about how it would work, and that's very useful. So I'd recommend that. Also, I think Bob Murphy has a book you can read for free. It's an eeny-weeny book, and it's called Chaos Theory. You can just Google Robert Murphy Chaos Theory and read it. He's got 2 essays in there about law and defense, and that's worth reading. He supplemented that recently with some more recent thought of his on the subject. He wrote an article for an online journal called Libertarian Papers that you might look up. But I think those are the most plausible scenarios. So I would recommend those sources.
Tom, I would also add, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but I would add Ian Scoble's book, Skoble, called Deleting the State. That's a great introduction to anarchy.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a good book.
I know who he is. I don't know him, but
Ian's hilarious. He's a great guy. Yeah. So Deleting the State.
Yeah, I'm looking right at it.
Yeah, it's really good. So he gets into part of Ian's argument is essentially that if you look in history, you can actually find in the American experience that roughly during the during the Revolutionary War period, we were essentially in a state of proper anarchy that functioned. And I think he's right. I think historically he's absolutely right.
Now, it's funny. I'm looking at it on Amazon. This is not a long book. It's just 160 pages.
That's right. Yeah, you can read it in a night. And it's so well written that you can fly through it. It's not meant to be deep. I mean, it's definitely meant to be an introduction to anarchy.
Let's see.
And Ian is also, for those of you who are interested, Ian has also done some extremely good work on anarchy in comics, especially in The Watchmen. He's done some really good stuff. He's a philosopher in Connecticut.
Nice. Okay, that's good. That's good to know.
I think he wrote something on The Simpsons too. I can't remember.
Hold on. Let me just help Archie here. I just had to hit reconnect a few times. Will this be downloadable after? I don't know if it's downloadable. I don't remember. I mean, it's certainly viewable after. Within a couple of days or a few days, it's archived. We are archiving these most recent ones now over in the live section of the site where you went initially to get the link. You'll be able to find it there. There's a great book on The Simpsons. Are you a fan of The Simpsons?
I watched the first few seasons that I liked a lot. I have not watched really in 20 years, but I watched the first probably 7 seasons.
Okay, yeah. Faithfully. I don't like the first couple of seasons. They're still working out the characters. There is a great book of essays on the economics of The Simpsons.
Really?
It's called Homer Economicus. Beautiful.
That's perfect.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I love it.
I think I interviewed the editor of that book on my podcast. And thing is, he got contributions from different scholars. Like, I don't know, maybe there might be like a chapter on recycling because there was an episode on recycling in The Simpsons, all that. And he took essays from all different scholars, and then he edited it, and it was published by something like Stanford University Press or something. And I tried to tell him,
wow.
Because he visited the Mises Institute. I can't think of his name right now, but it'll come to me. He visited the Mises Institute. He had this idea. And I said, all right, look, this is a winner. So let me just tell you, you're doing it all wrong. First of all, people just don't buy books of essays. That they don't. Essays by a whole bunch of different people. They make us feel good to contribute to them. They don't sell. you should write the book yourself. How hard could it be to write a book on The Simpsons? You should do it yourself and have it published by a popular publisher. This thing could do well. Don't send it to an academic publisher and have it be a book of essays. He did not take my advice. It sold okay, but it should have been a smash. That's Homer Economicus. That's hilarious.
That's a great title. Yeah, okay. That's great. I'll have to look that up.
All right. So somebody is asking, Brad, I'm fascinated with the mountain man period of our nation's history. Those guys were truly free. Have you read the A.B. Guthrie books?
Oh, yes. My wife and I are both huge fans of Guthrie. I actually like The Way West better than Big Sky. Big Sky is kind of anarchy gone wrong, right? I mean, the sociopath, the main character in there, is so brutal. But the follow-up where you're reading about Dick Summers in The Way West, I just think that's beautiful. I would, for those of you who are interested in mountain men, one of the best books I've ever read of anything. In fact, he's written two of my favorite books. There's a guy, I don't know if he's still alive. His name's Robert Utley, Utley. And he wrote a book called A Life Wild and Perilous. And it's just all these vignettes about the mountain men and just the most, these are stories you could never make up. They're just so incredible looking at what these guys did. So Kent, if you may know that already, but that's where you need to go. So make sure that you look up Utley. The other book he wrote that's just wonderful is his biography of Sitting Bull. That book has influenced me immensely, not only in loving Sitting Bull as a character, but in the way he wrote. If I've done anything right in my biographies, it's been because I've followed Utley's pattern. I think the guy's amazing for what he did. And, he's not one of us politically at all. He was the head historian for the National Park Service for 30 years, but just a really great writer and a great thinker.
Have you ever been tempted to try your hand at fiction?
I have. I've written a couple short stories, and I'm working on a book right now that I've been working on for a couple of years that's set about 2,000 years in the future with a kind of a weird Catholic fantasy setting. So only the church is left as any institution, and there are these competing kingdoms. It takes place on the Great Plains in Colorado. I don't know where it's going to go. So I don't know if it's I'm trying to be artful without being bombastic. Yeah, I'm trying to be libertarian without it appearing. I want it to be more mainstream in terms of the message. I want the message to be libertarian. I don't want people to realize it. So, right. So anyway, I'm trying to. I'm okay. It doesn't come to me naturally. If Tom asked me, Brad, I need an essay today on somebody, and I need 2,000 words, I can pump it out. But when it comes to fiction, I'm really slow. So
yeah, and it's funny with real fiction writers, it would be the opposite.
Yeah,
that's
what I think. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm not.
If you have to do an essay on Abraham Lincoln, forget about it.
Yeah, right. Tom? Do you write fiction?
No. I don't think I'd be any good at it. But my daughter loves writing fiction, and she has been part of something called National Something Writing Month or whatever.
Oh, right. Yeah, for November.
They're challenged to write 20,000 words in a month.
Isn't that great?
It ended today, and she did it.
Wow.
She wrote the 20,000 words.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. What's her story about?
Well, I've only gotten to see a little glimpse of it, but it's like a detective mystery kind of thing.
Nice.
Wow. But I mean, first of all, she is an amazing writer. And as you probably know, Brett, I mean, I know you love Hillsdale, but there must be times when you're reading those student papers that you say, who taught these kids to write? I mean, right. I know you have some bright students, but it's frustrating. Whereas I look at her writing and I say, my writing was nowhere near this level when I was
right. Yeah. Same with me and my kids. Yeah.
And I'm just so amazed at it. In fact, it's so good that I can give her very, very nitpicky response. And like, she understands that I love it and it's great. And it's only because it's so good that she's at a level where she would appreciate a slight little shade of meaning difference that she should have or whatever. I can even get to that level because that's where she is. Wow. She's unbelievable. And she said, the funny thing is I wrote the 20,000 words, but I'm nowhere near done with the story. I could see it easily going 40,000. And I told her, my book Meltdown is only 60,000. And that's a full length book. And she said, wow, when you put it that way, it really does make it seem like an accomplishment.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great, Tom. Is this your oldest daughter?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
She's great.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. She's very, I've been impressed with her.
Oh, yeah. She's tremendous. So, all right. Well, listen, we are just about at the end here. So we have a few more questions, but we also have the forums, libertyclassroom.com/forums. You guys as Basic Plus or Master members have access to those forums. You can ask questions there. We have a forum for each course and a general discussion forum. That one is not will not have faculty members in it. That's just for you all to discuss with each other. So if you want to get a question answered, make sure and put it in the appropriate course form. All right, I'm going to let Brad go. It's 10 p.m. It's a school night.
Great talking, guys. Yeah, so, thank you, everybody. Great questions. Thanks. Really appreciate it.
It was a wonderful night. And Brad, thanks for doing it.
I love you. So thanks, brother. That's great.
Thanks so much. All right, bye. Good night, everybody.